Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling something, well, kind of intriguing, but also a bit worrying. It's about how those large language models, those LLMs everyone's talking about, might have a built-in bias towards, formal education.
Yeah, it's a bit like they've picked up some of our own preconceived notions about what makes someone smart.
Exactly. And we're going deep on this with a research paper called, get this, Challenging the Education Bias. Really makes you think,
It does. It really gets you thinking about how we define intelligence and how that's, kind of baked into the tech we're building.
For anyone just tuning into this whole AI thing, let's do a super quick recap. We're talking about ChatGPT, those programs that can write stuff that sometimes sounds like, a human wrote it.
Right. And while that's pretty amazing, got to remember they learn from these huge, massive data sets, mostly text. Think like feeding a computer the whole Library of Congress. That's the scale we're dealing with.
So they're kind of like what? Superpowered parrots, just mimicking what they've seen, but not really getting the meaning.
That's a pretty good analogy. And that's where this whole bias thing comes in, right? If all that data they learn from has our own societal biases say that a college degree means you're smart, the LLM might start, spitting that back out.
Okay, so it's not like the AI is deliberately discriminating, more like it's learned a kind of warped view from all the info it's been fed.
Precisely. And these researchers, they used some clever methods to investigate this. One thing they looked at was word association, basically how strongly the LLM connects certain words.
Did they find anything unexpected in those word links?
Oh, quite a bit, actually. They found these strong associations between words like, say, university or degree with positive stuff like intelligence or competence. But the interesting thing is that link wasn't as strong for other ways people, learn stuff, like apprenticeships or years of on-the-job experience.
Hold on. So does that mean the AI thinks those other ways of learning are, less valuable?
Well, it's not really about the AI thinking the way we do, but the data shows the model kind of learned this hierarchy, where the formal education is at the top.
That's not how the world works, though. There are brilliant people who never set foot in college and people with fancy degrees who can't, change a tire.
You're absolutely right. And that's precisely why this whole bias thing is so important to understand. It's not just some theoretical problem. It has, real implications.
So how does this actually play out? Are we talking about AI writing super snooty job descriptions?
It can be even more subtle than that. The researchers found that, when they asked the LLM about different careers, it consistently gave a rosier picture for jobs that needed those advanced degrees, almost like it was downplaying other ways to, succeed.
Oh, I'm starting to see where this goes. This could affect someone's chances of getting hired, right?
It's a real possibility. Just imagine, an LLM screening job applications. It might see an applicant with tons of hands-on experience as, less qualified, just because they don't have that master's degree.
That's messed up. And, the paper brings up another point here. They mentioned how these LLMs often use this, super formal language, which could be intimidating or confusing for people who aren't used to all that academic jargon,
Yeah, it's like they're speaking a language that only a certain group really understands.
And that creates another layer of potential bias. It's almost like being judged for not speaking the right dialect.
Exactly. And it raises some big questions. What happens when we start using these things for loan approvals or social services? Could this bias make things even harder for people who are already facing, systemic barriers?
This is getting a little scary.
Yeah.
And it feels like it goes way beyond just getting a job. This could affect so many parts of our lives.
That's exactly why understanding this whole bias thing is so crucial. And the research, it doesn't just point out the problem. They actually dig into potential solutions, which, maybe we can talk about more.
Okay, well, before we get into all that, I think we got to really drive home just how serious this is.
I agree. To really get it, I think we need to hear from the people who are, actually affected by this bias. The researchers, they interviewed a whole bunch of folks, educators, policymakers, people from underrepresented backgrounds to get their perspectives.
So it's not just numbers and algorithms, it's real human stories too.
Exactly. And those stories, they really add a whole other dimension to the research. For example, one person said something that really stuck with me. They said it felt like the system is rigged against anyone who doesn't have the right credentials, even if they have a ton of knowledge and experience, just, not from traditional settings.
Wow, that's powerful. It makes it clear that we need to find solutions. And fast.
Absolutely. We have to make sure these technologies are used to create a more fair future, not one that just repeats the same inequalities.
Well, I'm definitely ready to hear about those solutions. What does the research suggest we can do to, lessen this bias?
There's no easy fix, unfortunately, but the researchers do have some solid recommendations. Like they talk about diversifying the data these LLMs are trained on, going beyond those academic texts, and including a wider range of voices and perspectives.
So, broadening the AI's horizons, it's almost like we got to give them a crash course in the real world.
That's a great way to put it. We got to teach them to value knowledge and skills that come from everywhere, not just classrooms and textbooks.
Makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Am I going to see researchers digging through old attics for lost folk tales?
Huh? Well, maybe not quite that dramatic, but you're on the right track. We need to get creative with what we feed these models. Think oral histories, community newsletters, even social media conversations. All those sources have valuable insights and perspectives that are, well, kind of missing from those training data sets.
It's like we need to build a whole new kind of library for these AIs, one that shows the full spectrum of human knowledge and experience. What else did the researchers suggest?
Another big one is coming up with more powerful debiasing techniques. Just trying to remove biased language from the data, they found that wasn't enough.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone, right? You got to fix the root of the problem.
Exactly. We need to teach these LLMs actually recognize and challenge the assumptions that lead to bias in the first place.
Okay, so it's not about censoring them, but giving them a new set of, ethical lenses to see the world through.
You got it. It's complex, for sure, but AI researchers are working on it.
Well, I'm glad someone's on the case. But this sounds like something that goes beyond the tech world, right? We can't just leave it to the programmers to fix.
Absolutely. This is a societal thing, Needs a multi-pronged approach, if you will.
So what can we, regular people do? Do we all need to become AI experts?
You don't need a PhD in computer science to make a difference. Just being aware of this bias, that's a huge first step.
Okay, awareness is key, but then what? Do we start, interrogating every chatbot we meet?
Well, it's a good start. Next time you're using one of these LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT, a customer service bot, whatever, ask yourself, where did this info come from? Could there be some hidden bias here? Is there another way to look at this?
So be a critical consumer of AI stuff. Don't just take it at face value.
You got it. And if something seems off or unfair, don't be afraid to say something. Push for better from the companies using this tech. Your voice matters.
Because we got to be AI watchdogs, right? Making sure this technology is working for us, not the other way around.
Exactly. The future of AI, it depends on all of us. We need to work together so these powerful tools create a more just and fair world.
I love that. It's good to know we all have a part to play in this whole AI future. But before we get too carried away with our AI activism, there's another piece we got to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think so. We've covered the problem, the need for solutions, but there's this deeper question we can't ignore. It's, kind of philosophical.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
It's about how we define what's valuable knowledge in the first place. The fact that LLMs have this bias towards formal education, that's reflecting our biases. We've told these machines to prioritize one way of knowing, often at the expense of other ways.
You're right. It's like we've built a system that rewards people for jumping through certain hoops, whether or not those hoops actually mean they're good at something.
And that's a problem that goes way beyond AI. It's about recognizing and valuing the different ways people learn, grow, and contribute to society.
That's such an important point. We got to move beyond this narrow definition of intelligence and embrace all the different ways people can be smart.
Exactly. Think about all those talented people out there who might not have a college degree, but have achieved mastery in their field through, years of experience.
They're the unsung heroes, the ones who keep things running, build things, make art, and take care of their communities. And their contributions are just as important as anyone with a PhD.
Couldn't agree more. We need a world where those contributions are seen and celebrated, not just tolerated or ignored.
This paper is a real wake-up call. It's made me realize how much we favor formal education and how deep that's ingrained in our thinking.
It's given me a lot to think about, too. Hopefully our listeners as well. We've got to challenge these assumptions, not just in AI, but in our daily lives.
Well said. This has really opened my eyes to how complex this all is. We've covered so much, but there's still more to explore.
Definitely. We've talked about the problem, the potential fixes, the bigger picture, but we haven't even dug into the real-world effects of this bias, which can be pretty concerning.
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. Tell me more about these real-world impacts. What parts of our lives are most at risk?
Well, let's start with healthcare. Imagine an LLM is being used to, help diagnose patients, which is already happening in some places.
Yeah, a lot of healthcare systems are experimenting with AI to streamline things.
Right, but now imagine that AI was trained mostly on data from like medical textbooks and journals, stuff that focuses on the knowledge of doctors with all those degrees.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going. What about all the expertise of other healthcare professionals, like nurses or paramedics? They might not have those fancy degrees, but they have a ton of practical knowledge and experience.
That's the problem. The AI, with its bias towards formal education, it might accidentally downplay those other professionals, even though they're so important for patient care.
So even though a nurse might have years of experience, the AI wouldn't see that as valuable as a doctor's degree. That's kind of terrifying.
It is a real concern, and it shows why we got to be so careful with how we design and use these AI systems. We can't let them just reinforce old hierarchies or undermine those who don't fit the, traditional mold.
It's like we're accidentally teaching these AIs to be, like, elitist, valuing a piece of paper more than actual experience.
It's not on purpose, of course. It's just a result of the data they learn from and all the biases that are already in that data.
This medical example is really eye-opening. Are there other areas where this bias could cause problems?
Oh, tons. Think about skilled trades, for instance. A plumber, an electrician. They might have decades of experience, a deep understanding of their craft, but an AI trained on academic stuff might not get how valuable that is.
Or what about artists, like a musician who's never taken a music theory class, but their playing can move you to tears?
Exactly. There are so many fields where talent and skill can't be summed up by a degree or certificate. And if we let AI decide who's competent, we're going to end up with a world that's both unfair and, well, kind of boring.
Yeah, we got to be careful not to let AI amplify those biases.
Yeah.
It's like we're risking a future where the only knowledge that matters comes from a university lecture.
And that would be a huge loss for all of us. We need AI to open up opportunities, not close them off. It needs to value all kinds of knowledge and talent, not just the kind you get in a degree program.
It's like we've fallen into this trap of thinking there's only one way to be intelligent. But the truth is there are so many different ways of knowing and being smart.
That's it. And if we want a truly fair and innovative society, one that uses AI to its fullest potential, we got to start by changing how we define what's valuable knowledge.
I love that. It's not just about fixing the AI, it's about fixing our own thinking. It's about recognizing and celebrating all the different ways people can be intelligent.
Couldn't agree more. And that's why this conversation about AI bias is so important, It makes us confront not just the limits of our technology, but also the limits of our own views.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening for me. I've learned so much about the potential problems with AI and how we need to fix them, like, now.
Me too. It's been fascinating, really, digging into this research and seeing how technology, bias, and societal values all connect.
Before we wrap up this part, I want to leave our listeners with a sense of hope and, a feeling that they can do something. Yes, there are challenges, but we're not powerless.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in shaping how AI develops.
So what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from this?
I hope they'll be more curious and more willing to question the assumptions behind our technology and behind how we see the world.
That's a great way to put it. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about potential biases in AI, the better we can navigate this crazy world.
And remember, don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge the status quo and demand better from the tech we create and the world we live in.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you'll keep exploring these issues and be part of the conversation about making a fairer future for everyone. Welcome back to our deep dive into AI bias. Just in case you missed the first part, we're talking about how those large language models, the ones that can write text, might be kind of biased towards, traditional education.
And we were saying this isn't just a theory. It can have real impacts, could even affect things like job applications or healthcare.
Right. Last time, we left off with some big questions about what all this means. So I'm curious, the paper, does it offer any, hope?
Yeah.
Any solutions?
It does. It's a complex problem, they admit that, but they give some concrete ideas for how we can try to fix this bias.
Okay, so what's step one? Do we get to, send these AIs back to school for a crash course in real-world experience or something?
I like that image. But seriously, one big thing is diversifying the data. What we feed these LLMs to train them. Can't just rely on academic stuff. Got to bring in wider voices, different perspectives.
So instead of just trying to get rid of biased language, we got to expose the AI to like a broader range of human knowledge and experience.
Exactly. Remember, these models, they learn by crunching tons of data. And right now, that data is mostly written stuff from people with, fancy degrees. It's like if an AI only learned from university libraries. Kind of limited view.
It's like raising a kid in a bubble, right? They might know all about Shakespeare, but couldn't tell you how to change a tire.
Perfect analogy. Just like a kid needs all sorts of experiences to learn about the world, an AI needs different sources too.
Okay, but what does data diversification actually look like? Are we talking like feeding AI social media posts and conversations from the street?
You're closer than you think. They suggest using things like oral histories, folk tales, community newsletters, stuff like that. Things that capture the knowledge of folks who maybe didn't go the traditional college route.
Wow, that's interesting. Like building a whole new library for these AIs, one that values lived experience, not just what's in a textbook.
Yeah. It's about broadening how the AI sees expertise. Not just valuing knowledge that's been written down, but also stuff passed down through generations, shared in communities, or like practical skills.
I love that. Like we're giving these AIs a crash course in being human.
In a way, yeah. We got to help them see that intelligence isn't just an academic thing. It's everywhere. In workshops, community centers, even like on the basketball court.
Okay, so diversifying data, that's one piece. What other strategies are there?
Another one is creating stronger debiasing techniques. It's not enough to just clean up the language. We got to deal with the underlying assumptions that cause bias.
Earlier, we were talking about word associations. Can you give an example of how those hidden assumptions can mess things up?
Sure. Let's say an LLM's got to pick who's best for a leadership role. If it learned from data that links leadership with, say, being assertive, decisive, well, it might accidentally favor men over women, just because those traits are often stereotypically linked with men.
So even if we take out the obviously sexist stuff, those hidden biases can still slip in.
Exactly. It's like giving someone a recipe but not telling them their oven might be different. They follow the steps perfectly but still end up with a burnt cake.
I'm starting to realize how deep this problem goes. It's not just about cleaning up the words. It's like we got to rewire how the AI thinks.
That's it. We can't just do surface level fixes. We need strategies that go to the root of the bias. The paper talks about more sophisticated techniques, ones that can spot and fix those hidden assumptions.
So we're not censoring the AI or telling it what to think. It's more like we're teaching it to think critically, helping it see and question those ingrained biases.
Precisely. It's about giving the AI a more nuanced, more balanced view of things.
Okay, so data diversification, advanced debiasing, but who's going to make this all happen? It sounds huge.
You're right. It's not a quick fix. It's going to take AI researchers, data scientists, ethicists, even social scientists all working together.
So this isn't just a tech problem, it's a people problem.
Absolutely. Technology reflects our values. If we want AI that's fair, we got to look at our own biases first.
I can't help but wonder, though, is this even realistic? It seems like a mountain to climb.
It's a challenge, for sure. But the researchers are optimistic. They say, with effort, we can make real progress. They also say it's crucial for the companies making these LLMs to be transparent and accountable.
Right, transparency, you mentioned that before. Seems like that's got to be a key part of this whole thing.
Definitely. Right now, a lot of secrecy surrounds how these models are trained, what data they use, makes it almost impossible to find and fix biases when you can't even see what's going on.
Like trying to fix a car engine without opening the hood.
Exactly. We need to see under the hood to make sure these models are built and used the right way.
So what would transparency look like? Are we going to see, like, the AI's entire training manual online?
It might not be quite that simple. But the idea is to open up the AI development process, like sharing info on the data sets used, having clear guidelines for ethical AI, and making sure there are independent audits to check things out.
So it's not just trusting the tech companies to do the right thing, it's making sure there are ways to hold them accountable.
Exactly. And it's not about saying all tech companies are bad or anything. It's just recognizing this is powerful stuff, It can do good, but it can also do harm. We got to make sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
All this makes sense, but what about us, the people actually using this tech? Do we just sit around and wait for the experts to figure it out?
Not at all. You can do things right now to make a difference.
Like what? Should I be writing angry emails to the people who made my favorite chatbot?
You could. But maybe a better way is to be a critical consumer of, anything AI makes.
Okay, that sounds a little less confrontational. So what does being a critical consumer of AI mean?
It means paying attention, asking questions. Next time you're using an LLM, don't just believe everything it tells you. Think. Where'd this info come from? Is there some hidden bias here? What's another way to look at this?
So it's about approaching AI with a little bit of, like, healthy skepticism. Same as we should do with any information, really.
Exactly. And if something seems off or you think it's biased, don't be afraid to speak up. Demand better from the folks using this tech. Your voice matters.
It's like we all got to be AI watchdogs, making sure it's working for good.
You got it. The future of AI, it's not set in stone. We're all shaping it through our choices, what we do, and what we demand.
You've given us a lot to think about. Before we move on, I want to go back to something you said about this bias being part of a bigger societal problem. You talked about redefining what we see as valuable knowledge. Can you say more about that?
Sure. The reason LLMs have this bias towards formal education, it's because we, as a society, often overvalue certain kinds of knowledge and undervalue others. It's like we've built a system that favors degrees and certificates over actual skills, lived experience, and cultural wisdom.
It's like we've made this hierarchy of knowledge with formal education at the top and everything else below. But that's not always how knowledge works in the real world, right?
You're right. Think about all the incredible knowledge that exists outside of universities. The skills of a master craftsperson, the wisdom of an elder, the creativity of a street artist. These are all forms of knowledge that often get overlooked.
You make a good point. We lose so much when we say the only intelligence that matters is the kind measured by tests or listed on a resume.
Exactly. And if we want a truly fair and innovative society, one where everyone can succeed, we got to start by broadening our definition of what it means to be smart.
I see how this AI bias thing connects to bigger issues of justice and fairness.
It's all linked. If we want AI that serves humanity, we need a society that values all the different ways people can contribute.
That's a powerful message. We could talk about this for hours, but for now, we got to take a break. We've covered a lot today, from the technical stuff to the bigger societal picture.
It's been a great discussion, and I hope it's given everyone listening some things to think about.
Before we go, just a reminder, this isn't just a problem for the AI experts. It's something we all got to be aware of and involved in.
Absolutely. Remember, knowledge is power, no matter where you get it.
We'll be back soon with more insights into the world of AI. Until then, stay curious and keep asking those questions. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our exploration of this whole thing with large language models, those AI systems that can write like us humans, and how they might have this hidden bias towards, well, traditional education.
Yeah, we've been saying all along this bias, it's not just some technical glitch. It has real-world effects that could impact, everyone.
Last time, we got into some possible solutions like diversifying the data those LLMs learn from and making those debiasing techniques more robust.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into solutions, I think we got to really hit home why this matters.
I agree. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the technical stuff and forget about the human side of things.
Yeah, exactly. And reading this paper, one thing that really jumped out at me was the section on the potential consequences of this bias in different fields.
Yeah, that's a good one. They use this really powerful example from healthcare. I think it shows just how high the stakes are. They talk about, imagine an LLM being used to help diagnose patients.
Okay, so AI assisting doctors. I know that's something a lot of healthcare systems are already trying out.
Right, but now imagine that AI was trained mostly on medical textbooks and journals, stuff that really focuses on the knowledge and perspectives of doctors, the ones with all the degrees.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. So what happens to the expertise of other healthcare professionals, like nurses, paramedics, people who may not have those credentials, but have tons of practical knowledge and experience?
That's the problem. The AI, with its built-in bias for formal education, it might accidentally downplay what those other professionals bring to the table, even though they're crucial for good patient care.
So a nurse could have years of experience working with patients, but the AI wouldn't see that as being as valuable as a doctor's medical degree. That seems, I don't know, kind of dangerous.
It's a serious worry, and it really underlines why we got to be so careful about how we design and use these AI systems. We don't want them to make existing inequalities worse or, undermine the expertise of folks who don't fit the traditional mold.
It's like we're accidentally teaching these AIs to be snobs, valuing a piece of paper more than actual real-world experience.
Well, it's not intentional, obviously. It's just it comes from the data and the biases that are already baked into that data,
This medical example is really making me think. Are there other areas where this type of bias could cause serious problems?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the skilled trades. Like a plumber or an electrician could have decades of experience, really know their stuff inside and out. But an AI that mostly learned from academic stuff might not recognize how valuable that practical knowledge is.
Or what about the arts?
Yeah.
A musician who's never taken a music theory class but can, like, move you to tears with their playing.
Exactly. There are so many things people do where talent and expertise aren't about a degree or a certificate. If we let AI decide who's competent, we'll end up with a world that's not just unfair, but also, well, a lot less interesting.
Yeah, we got to be careful. AI doesn't just make those biases worse.
Yeah.
It's like we're risking a future where the only knowledge that matters is what you learned in a university lecture hall.
And that would be a huge loss, for everyone. We need AI to open up opportunities, not shut them down. It has to value all those different types of knowledge and talent, not just what you get from a degree.
It's like we've gotten stuck in this idea that there's only one way to be intelligent. But really, there are so many ways of knowing and being smart.
Exactly. And if we want a society that's fair and innovative, one that uses AI in the best way possible, we got to start by rethinking what valuable knowledge really means.
I love that. It's not just about fixing the AI, it's about fixing our own thinking, recognizing and celebrating all those different ways people can be intelligent.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's why these conversations about AI bias are so crucial. They make us look at not just what's wrong with our technology, but also what might be wrong with our own viewpoints.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. I've learned a ton about the potential problems with AI and, the urgency of addressing them.
Me too. It's been really interesting to unpack all this research and see how technology bias and societal values all kind of intertwine.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave folks with a sense of, hope, and that they can do something about this. There are challenges, yes, but we're not helpless.
You're right. We all have a part to play in shaping AI's future.
So if there's one thing you want listeners to take away from all this, what would it be?
I hope they'll walk away with a renewed curiosity and a willingness to question the assumptions that are behind our technology and behind how we see the world.
Well said. Knowledge is power. And the more we know about potential biases in AI, the better we can navigate this increasingly complex world.
And don't forget, don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge the status quo, and demand better from the technology we create and the world we live in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll keep exploring these issues and be part of the conversation about creating a more just and equitable future for all.